Hello, and welcome to a new type of video, something that I want to play with a bit and see how it goes. No gameplay, but we're going to talk about the news in Guild Wars 2 recently, specifically the end of year blog post that came out a few days ago, as well as a recent interview article that came out both talking about the past and the future and how that affects everything. So, without further ado, let's get to it. So here we have the ArenaNet blog post, and both links to the blog post and the article for the interview are going to be in the description of the video below. So please view the sites, at least for the article, view the sites, help them out, that sort of thing. But to begin with, it acknowledges a bit of business speak, talking about the launch of Secrets of the Obscure and generally that what they've done to release Secrets of the Obscure is better for the long run for them as a whole from a developer. And that seems to be a theme both in this blog post and in the interview that follows, that whatever changes they've made behind the scenes, whatever they're doing to implement this yearly cadence, it's helping them now as well as in the future. And it seems to be primarily developer facing. Now they will mention, oh, it benefits the player and here's why it benefits the player, but personally I believe it's better for them as a whole, which is perfectly fine, but there are some caveats. Uh, there are things to talk about with it, and right off the bat they do acknowledge that, hey, a shift to a yearly cadence is not something done lightly. There are stressors involved there. Everybody on the outside worries about crunch. Who's to say what they're worried about on the inside that they're nervous, other than it's just changes? But look, they delivered this expansion, and on top of that, guess what? It was a financial success. Like that's great. Everybody wants to see that coming out of a studio that makes a game that you enjoy. And specifically, and they acknowledge it here too, when the gaming industry isn't doing too hot as a whole. Massive layoffs across the year for no apparent reason in some ways, it seems. But I digress. As we move on through the article, they get into that discussion about the yearly cadence, right? And the facts like, hey, look, this is for you as well as us. Because we're able to shift stances faster, supposedly, more fluid approach, more dynamic approach to whatever they're doing. They are saying in this blog post that they're able to implement changes to, hey, our fifth expansion. Like a lot of the lessons that they've learned, they've picked up, they've applied to the fifth expansion, which seems to be very good across the board. Also saying, hey, by the way, not only are we working on the fifth expansion right now, which makes sense, it should be coming sometime late next year, they're also talking about what comes after that. Now, from the blog post specifically, if I only read the blog post, I was like, ooh, what comes after, right? Are you implying that there's going to be a new iteration of Guild Wars coming? I don't think that's the case, specifically because they've just shifted stance to a yearly expansion release model. At least I hope it's not. Now, it could make sense if behind the scenes they're doing other stuff, free up some people to do other things and then leave a bigger team to do more. But the interview after does specifically acknowledge an expansion 6 for 2025. So what's coming next, right? After the expansions, after everything? Well, or before the expansions. Well, hey, they talk about the update that's coming in February, as well as an update or a running event for World vs. World restructuring, the beta that seems to be running off and on. I haven't personally played a lot of World vs. World, so I'm not entirely tied into that dynamic, but it talks about the legendary armor, which I'm excited about earning, the Wizard Vault reward refresh, which I'm hoping for another mount skin that you're able to earn for relatively free. I mean, basically free, just play the game, as well as some other cool things. I do think the Wizard's Vault hopefully has some changes in the future, at least objective-wise. That's acknowledged in the article that follows. But another thing that they acknowledge is their own talent within here. So they do link a video to YouTube that currently is in the view that I have here. Please go to this blog post if you're interested in hearing some of this work behind the scenes for Seekers of the Obscure for one of the songs that was made. Please go take a listen to it. Last thing to end off for this blog post that I think is important overall for communication as a whole, something that I think has been acknowledged before within the gaming industry, but isn't typically done or hasn't recently done until recently, is acknowledging that they're taking a break. Like, hey, we appreciate you all for your help. We'll see you in 2024. That's something that's, well, yes, we're only, 2 weeks away from 2024. It's acknowledging the fact that people are taking breaks. I've seen more posts about companies saying, hey, we're letting people, our entire studio, and even if it's an indie studio, right? Hey, we're taking a month break. Like, we're taking time off, we're stepping away. It's important whether you celebrate Christmas or you celebrate some holiday within this time of year. It's very important for people to have that recognized and be able to take that time away, not only for themselves, but to also be with other people in their lives that do have those breaks. Uh, Very important thing. All around, I'm really generally happy about this blog post. I think it doesn't say a lot about what is coming. I think it's more communication with us as the players saying, hey, thanks for letting us take this risk. Here's what we think it's done for us, and hopefully how it helps you in the future. Here's what's coming in the immediate future. We can't talk about expansion 5 and 6 just yet. Now, we move on to our article, which is coming from wccftech.com. And start off with, they do kind of consolidate some of the things that we already mentioned about the next update, the Temple of Fabe challenge mode strike that's coming in the new update, the weapon proficiencies, which they will talk about, legendary armor, and the Wizard's Vault refresh. The bigger thing here that I want to acknowledge right now is Guild Wars 2 is on sale. So if you have watched a stream on Twitch or if you have watched a video on YouTube and you're like, oh my gosh, I'd want to give Guild Wars 2 a try, guess what? You can get like base game and first 3 expansions for $20. Man, that's a steal, especially with End of Dragons having came out just last year. That's a lot of amazing content. I myself haven't even worked through all of the content in those 3 expansions during this time, and $20 is a steal. I mean, go get it, right? So, interview breakdown. So, first, right off the bat is, hey, look, acknowledging the elephant in the room that I talked about earlier. You're doing this faster. Why are you doing this faster, and what will this do for the foreseeable future? And overall, what they appear to be concerned with, at least, is content drought. And that was a big thing if you've played Guild Wars 2 for a long time. That was an issue, is that you would never know when the next Living Story episode would come out. You would hope that it would be out in 4 months, but it might be 6 months, I think, is one of the longest ones. Maybe even longer than that, 8 months maybe. I digress. And even then, you're looking at expansion releases, 2017 for Path of Fire, but we didn't see End of Dragons until 2022, so that's 5 years. Now granted, there's a pandemic in the middle of that, and that makes sense. Plus, the whole Icebrood saga, for them at least, was an attempt at an expansion through Living Story. But all that to say, this is being done from their perspective and their communication that, hey, we're trying to help you, the players, by developing content faster for you, but we're also making sure we're taking care of ourselves. I like the idea that they say this is a marathon and not a sprint. So they're trying to focus on their future. They're trying to take care of themselves. Again, I just want to stress this because it does scare me a bit, is that if anybody says, hey, yeah, we can get this done faster and provide you better content, usually something else slips, right? Usually something else is lost here. So I'm hoping that's not the case. I'm hoping that the devs are all good and fine and everything. At least seems to be fine. But here's where they acknowledge, hey, 2024 for expansion 5 and uh, expansion 6 in 2025. Man, that's I part of me like is looking at that, is like, man, it would be really great if expansion like 5 was 5 and 6 was 6, but I also don't want to wait another year for more content, so that's perfectly fine as well. And I will say that, acknowledging what I've said earlier, right, is as a player, we do want content as soon as possible, but if it's better for the devs, like if it helps them in the long run, take your time, make it better. Example Pokemon, right? Like Game Freak, Nintendo, do something, just make it run better. You've got a great thing there, just make it run better. Take your time. So, financial success, right? They talk about the financial success and everything, and they say, hey, what's your team look like? You know, who's working on this? What's your player base look like, and everything like that. They don't mention any specifics, just generalizations. And that's okay. I don't think you need to say, oh yeah, we've got 500 devs working on this game, and we've got a player base of 5 million, 10 million, whatever. Now, does that make players feel better, right? To know that their MMO or their game is in a quote unquote healthy state? Yes. But they do talk in generalizations and they say, look, and I've put parameters around this too. They say, okay, their team is the same size as Season 4. Now, Season 4 was the end of 2017 after Path of Fire launched, so their third expansion. Uh, so immediately you look at that and you say, okay, they're about the same size as Season 4, but also after they say we're larger than we were at the release of End of Dragons in 2022. To me, that's kind of scary a bit. You know, it says, hey, we're larger than we were for the big expansion we released last year. That's great that they've hired more people, and specifically that if you remember back in 2019, there were some layoffs from ArenaNet, I believe coming down from NCSoft. I'm not entirely up to date from that, but it was at least ArenaNet was affected by layoffs. So you've got that gap there where people did leave or were lost or the team downsized, whatever, between here. They got back up in people. And they do acknowledge what I've said earlier a bit, like, hey, we don't need too big of a team. We're not focused on trying to compare team sizes. But they do talk about player size and they look, hey, we've got more new players, or at least strongest is what the term's used, uh, is strongest since 2016-2017, which 2017 was Path of Fire, which first introduced mounts to Guild Wars 2, and I think was a great addition that at least World of Warcraft, in my opinion, took the mount design from Guild Wars 2 and incorporated it into Dragonflight. So it must have been a great decision, right? But they also talk about, hey, it came to Steam, and we have more first-time players than any point during the COVID pandemic gaming boom. And that is a kind of important thing, because if you think about it, a lot of people didn't have time on their hands during the pandemic. So, right, hey, look, can we talk about specifics? Like, this is what this question here specifically is saying, is like, look, can you say when you're talking about varying meaningful ways? And I appreciate this question in the interview because it's the truth. I've mentioned it a bit, like a lot of these things more specifically seem like they're saying, hey, this is helping us in the long run as developers. And even in the answer to the question, they do say it this way. I hope that the reason that the answers are this vague is because they can't say what they have like changed or what changes they are implementing based on player feedback. They want them to be a surprise. They want to come out with this great announcement and say raids are back, right? And dungeons are back, or whatever content you want is back, or hey, we are removing transmutation charges, or hey, we're making mount skins earnable. completely across the board, whatever, we're not as focused as that monetization. I don't know, but that's my hope as a player, is that they're being pretty vague about this because they don't want to ruin a surprise. Uh, in general, though, it's more about what they're saying is being able to fix things faster. And the secondary concern off of that is when you oversimplify right and you read, hey, they're wanting to be able to do this so that they can fix things faster or take care of things faster. Um, Hopefully that means things will be fine right off the bat, right? That's their ability to restructure and address focus on fixing things or being able to take care of issues means that it's not going to affect what immediately comes out. And it's a good thing they do say, hey, look, this is how this has affected the current expansion. You know, our ability to be able to take things and work with them faster and all these different developer aspects that personally I listen to as a fan. I'm like, okay, cool, that's great, but come on, like, give us something. And this interviewer seems to be well versed with Guild Wars 2 because they say, hey, look, you've gotten rid of elite specializations, right? Or it appears that you've gotten rid of it. Uh, are there going to be any more in the future? And they gave a very vague, look, we're not getting rid of them for good. We just like the idea of patching holes with weapons that are able to be offered. And a follow-up question does hit on this detail pretty well. One thing I do want to say here, just to highlight, right, is we plan to focus on weapons for our next expansion, but we have a fun surprise in store to keep things fresh and exciting. Hopefully, that could mean a new expansion. Expansion. Of course, it means a new expansion. Hopefully, that could mean a new weapon, right? A lot of other speculation I've heard online, or I say a lot, some speculation that I've seen is, hey, does this mean underwater combat is getting an overhaul, or new underwater weapons, or different types of terrain, if you will, different types of weapons specifically, is kind of where my line of thought is going. I hope they're not like completely overhauling the combat system they already have. It seems pretty good, and especially to focus in like all your work into those weapons and then do something different makes no sense. But new weapon is what I'm thinking here, right? And here, this next question, right, is like, okay, so how do you say, all right, engineer gets a short bow, right, or guardian gets pistol, I think is what guardian got this time, and they've acknowledged that in the past it's more of an aesthetic thing, right, a general theme to say, okay, this is, you know, this sounds cool or looks cool is my simplification of it, right? Awesome, we'll run with it. But for this expansion, they acknowledge that, hey, this is more about addressing shortcomings. This is more about saying, how do we make this class more viable in PvP, PvE, world versus world, whatever? How do we provide healing to different classes? How do we provide, CC skills, for example, right? Different damages, whatever. One of the fun things that I like here, right, is saying, hey, how do we address that, providing options for non-projectile range damage because of reflex and blocks. Thank you. I hate, granted I can switch to my mace as an engineer now, right? But I hate the idea that I'm primarily using my rifle or my grenades or whatever, and then it's like, okay, now all my reflex are back at me. Awesome. I do appreciate because they ask, hey, is the ranger ever going to get a rifle or a pistol? Which is a fair question, I think, right? You've got somebody who's a range class. Can you give them another range weapon? And the answer is, hey, no comment. There's at least acknowledgement of it, so that's nice. They do mention the proficiencies beta, and hey, do you have any comments about what's going to happen? Because as with anything that happens in a game, right, people do have comments. People do like things and don't like things. And the answer is, we're going to address this next year. Like, we will talk about this early next year. So hopefully, I'm guessing January, because if the update's coming in February, maybe January, we get a blog post that says, all right, here's what's coming for weapon changes. Here's what's coming for probably maybe a forum post or a live stream about the weapon changes. Then here's another one coming talking about Wizard Vault changes, like probably a small blog post about that. Hey, here's what your legendary armor is going to look like a bit more, that kind of stuff. So again, news coming next year, not a shocker. Uh, Wizard Vault objectives, can we get more PvE? Yep, they're listening. They're going to add new objectives. Hopefully that means you don't have to run the same mini dungeon or jumping puzzle or whatever for the umpteenth time or go do an activity. Whatever it is, I'm glad that they are listening to that for PvE activities. That's nice. Here's one that personally for me, I don't know very well because it's world versus world related, but they do talk about the world restructuring that was mentioned earlier versus the alliance system, which uh, apparently has been delayed, scrapped, whatever. Um, Basically, to sum it all up, they do break it down that restructuring is the matchmaking and the alliance is the grouping inside the matchmaking. So trying to get small groups together that are guilds, that are groups of people who want to tackle it rather than roam. That's the difference. And the breakdown here is, at least my probably oversimplification of it, is rather than make a system that is essentially guilds again for an alliance, they said, hey, look, let's just focus on the matchmaking first. We'll try to figure out how to make something like alliances work because you already have guilds. Like you can already get up to 500 players together for world versus world and go in together. And I forget how many guild slots you can have as a whole, like how many guilds you can be with. Kind of makes sense for you to have a world versus world guild and then you have your whatever guild, but you can have belonging to both, I guess. But it also, and on the same time, you say, well, why can't I have it all in one place? Why would I want to scrap, 250 of my people who want to do the high-end raiding and don't want to be a part of a world versus world guild and contribute to my other stuff? Again, I'm mostly ignorant to the world versus world stuff and the PvP stuff in this game, so I don't have too much of a comment, but they do say, look, we're going to comment on this early next year. So to me, it seems like they might have something to say, or at least they're going to say the same thing they say in this interview again. And after the restructuring, this is the next beast that they tackle. They do talk about the different amounts of currencies, and the short answer here is, hey, look, we recognize it's an issue. We have done it recently with all the dungeon tokens and everything, but rather than take all the currencies, right, and just consolidate it once, we want to do it when it makes sense, like when we can break it up into chunks and put it in between things, or it's addressing previous content. So, like other online games, it could happen in a quality patch later down the road, or with an expansion where they just want to shoot. I say just want to. They want to put something else in there that's a quality thing that is able to be done, and they just do it at that time. Um, Challenge modes for dungeons is another thing because, again, dungeons are mostly neglected or are neglected for fractals nowadays, right? And the answer is nope, we're not currently considering that. In-game, which is a big thing for a lot of players, right? Hey, what do I do after I'm done with the game? Like, what do I do? What's my motivation? And the answer here is like, look, in the first half of the year, you're going to get your challenge mode for the strike. You're going to get a fractal along with a challenge mode, and then get excited for the PvE content that's coming in our next expansion. I hope for other people that this is what they want, whether it is a new raid or a new type of in-game activity that can scratch the itch of a raid, or is something that is in-game related difficulty, but is still accessible to other players. I hope that they don't consider Convergys's really quote-unquote in-game activity, primarily because you can still do it publicly and it is still puggable, right? You can still get people and generally pull off an instance I've only had one instance of a convergence fail. Now, yeah, you can have it happen for people who don't know what to do or don't follow commander tag or whatever, but um, for the people who want the harder itch to scratch, I hope this does it for them. Having only done 2 challenge mode strikes, well, 2 strikes, I haven't even done challenge mode strikes, I think. 2 strikes regular, those do seem like a decent level of difficulty for a small group. So hopefully, again, I think that challenge mode amps that up a bit, and then moving on from there, maybe something new or something uh, more the same with raids. This one I do really like. I think it is important that they acknowledge this. It is a good question because we do have a trend in the industry in MMOs, and I say trend, World of Warcraft, RuneScape. I know Final Fantasy 14 is not doing it, but like classic, right? Hey, what's old is new again. We're gonna set up a server. You can play just like it was 2004 or 2006 or whatever, right? So they ask the question, are you interested in do this or even a hardcore server? And their answer is like, no, look, we don't want to chase the trend. Like, it's nice, it's interesting, but we want to focus on making the best game that we currently can make, and that's this. I think that is important for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons that I jumped into Guild Wars 2 to begin with was the idea of the living story, quote unquote, changing the world, right? The idea that what happened during the living story impacted the whole thing, and Tyria will never be the same. Now, their approach to living story has changed since then, so there aren't those big change events really anymore. But all that to say, it's not worth going back, it's worth moving forward. Tell us new stories, tell us new things. And as people have mentioned online, some of the things that were implemented previously aren't the best. So all that to say, it's not currently on the table for them, so they're just letting it sit. Final question is about tech-based things, tech improvements for Guild Wars 2, because of them saying that they're interested in supporting it for multiple years to come. Hey, so what are you doing about anti-aliasing and DLSS and these different technical features to help improve the performance of the game, specifically for rendering with graphics? So, I'm not going to hit on this too heavily just because the basic answer that they come to is it's not their priority. They could look into it. They're more focused on things that they can get to first, right? They say low-hanging fruit is what they want to address first before trying to make big changes. I do think that's okay. I do think that's important. They do acknowledge that they made the move to DirectX 11, which is great. For me personally, and I realize this is not an easy undertaking. I just hope it is a consideration for the far future for Guild Wars as a franchise. Whatever comes next, I hope that performance comes into factor a bit better because of the CPU whole shenanigans, right? The fact that like my entire performance seems to be bottlenecked to my CPU is terrifying. And hopefully, whatever comes after Guild Wars 2, if there is an after Guild Wars 2, in some way, that if it is a new engine or a new system or whatever, I don't want to say that it is easy, or I don't want to say that it's a quick thing to do, which is why I acknowledge it's probably not going to happen within Guild Wars 2, but I hope something happens that makes it run better across the board and not be choked down to the CPU. But that is the end of that article, and as a whole, that is the end of this video. As we switch back into the game, I do want to say thank you for watching. I do hope that this video is a decent thoughts summary of the blog post and the article that came out if you do like this kind of content, if you've listened to it and you say, hey, I want to hear you talk more about Guild Wars 2 or Warframe or Monster Hunter or Wayfinder, etc., right? Give a like, leave a comment, let me know. Um, I hope this is something that I can continue with in the future just because I am passionate about the news side of things, primarily because it's what's coming next, right? It's always exciting to know or to speculate upon what is coming next. And that's what I'm hoping for is with the next Living Story release and the next, hopefully, teaser of the next expansion in, I'm gonna guess April or May, maybe. Hopefully we get like concept art, right? Concept art is always cool to be able to look at and be like, ooh, what are we doing next? Yeah, I agree, Scale. But I digress. Thank you for watching. I hope you have had a great day, and I will see you next time.